People getting outside a little bit? No, I'm seeing all over the board. We've been eating outside. Actually, any day it's nice, we'll eat outside. And feeling a little bit red, getting a little sunburn. I was on that side of the sun all lunch and then sat down for meditation in the evening. The sun was coming in right on the right side of my face again. Just getting nice and toasted. Feels like a blessing. And I didn't think I was going to mention this, but it's kind of on my mind. Someone I love dearly got out of prison today after being in there for 5 years. I guess clapping's good for that, yeah. And I guess I bring that up because, please come in, don't find an empty seat. I bring that up because it's been impacting how I see the world and am living and experiencing things. He talked about the experience of eating, what was it, an olive. He was like, oh, an olive. And then he was like, and then I had a piece of salami and a barbecue chip, a barbecue potato chip. And just the kind of preciousness he's encountering everything in his life, and the ability to see children running and laughing and playing, and be outside and see the river. And it's been kind of washing my own eyes for all the delightful experiences I have all the time, but don't pay attention to and have gratitude for. So I share that in order to invite you to that same gratitude. That's kind of always near, but so easy to forget. So, and thank you for the applause. That's really sweet. And so I thought we'd start off the class today by watching a video, actually. You can see that the monitor is still turned this way. Some of you may not, Rose, you may not be able to see it. You can, maybe move around for a little bit to see it. And Joichi Tech Monk will take care of that. And so folks online, he's going to do a share screen action. He may have already done it. You can't see. So everyone can turn. It's about 2 or 3 minutes, so people can turn and just look at that.
Stand by for 2 seconds.
Standing by.
So Dave, was that music, that amazingly like haunting music of the, I don't even know if they're called music, those sounds, were those of the tuning? Is that the sounds that are made when tuning or truing a wheel? Can you,
Yes.
Oh, cool.
I encourage you, it's 2.5 minutes and the sound was out of sync, but it's fine, you get the idea. But it was I have a friend who builds wheels, the woman Jude in the image, and all it was the audio of her truing a bicycle wheel by using finger picks and gauging the tension, and that was the sound. She plays it like a harp and tunes the wheel, and that makes it perfectly true.
Wow.
And so just the audio of that.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
So I wanted to show that, one, because Dave made it, and that's cool. But also I think there are some neat metaphors in there for what we might be doing and sort of truing up our ethical life and truing up our hearts through Buddhist practice. And I mean, the metaphors just abound with that last bit that you just mentioned, that she just does it by sound. Or maybe not just, but that's really a part of it. There's a story in the mythology of the Buddha's awakening that he was sitting, practicing very diligently and kind of in his aesthetic practice mode where he was kind of crushing his body. And someone went by on a boat and was playing a harp or some sort of stringed instrument that they had in India at that time. I don't know what it is. And they were singing, if the string is too tight, it will break, but if it's too loose, it won't make a sound. And that was said to kind of like wake him up to something and kind of put his mind towards the path of awakening. So that's so neat about the tuning of, you can tune a true wheel that way too. So also, I mean, going on with the metaphor, how are we listening? How are we feeling the wheel on the road? How are we recognizing if it's pulling to the side a little bit, if it's kind of catching on our brakes a little bit and we're not expecting that, and how do we take time to true it up? And so it's interesting that the wheels tell us about the terrain we're on, and also the terrain is telling us about our wheels at the same time. They're meeting each other. And so to roll into our next activity, we're going to true up this wheel together. I thought this would be a fun way for us to play with the homework. I had asked people to look at this. This sort of just came out of my own head. I would say it's heavily Buddhist influence, but I'm not using a lot of words that are common in Buddhist teaching, and made kind of a, I don't know what you'd call this, graph like situation, a flow chart for how ethical sensitivity is informed in our life and how we go on cultivating that. And so my idea was that we'd hopefully get through 5, 10, almost everyone be able to say something about this chart, and I'll cross out whatever I wrote or someone else wrote. You can be pretty ruthless about that. And then we'll write in your own word or your own idea. And then if you just give sentence or 2 or 3 kind of explaining why that hits you in a particular way, and you're like, oh, that word doesn't work for me, I like this one, or to add any kind of squiggly line or different kind of feedback loop, and you can sort of direct me how you think that should work. I think it'll be a fun way to play with this idea and kind of open up our creativity. And I also have different colors, so the colors really matter. So I don't know how well you can see that online. Can you guys see it okay? No. Cool. And Jacob's gotta know. Joichi, do you think you could make it a little bit bigger? Maybe just zoom in on the chart. Oh, he's maxed out. Okay, this is where we're gonna have to keep it then. Okay.
I can bring up the chart like on my end.
Okay. I'll try and narrate what's happening, so you can probably imagine it on your own. Anyone just raise your hand and yeah, go ahead, Eric.
I actually think if I messed this chart at all, which I think is really great, I would switch intention/action and truth and law. I would just reverse them.
Holy smokes.
Ruthless.
All right. What color would you have for that? No, maybe I'll just.
Or can we just put the arrows down the way?
That's kind of where I was at.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then we're going counterclockwise.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna stick
I'm
with
okay
Eric's.
with that.
Eric's thought about this, but I'm not prepared to wreck this chart so ruthlessly right now. Stick with me in a minute or so. You can imagine these are switched right now. So, and again, real briefly, so I'll go with it how it is now. We have truth and law, I guess it's starting out with, or wherever you move, and that connects with values, and there's kind of a belief and a purchase and an idea of a value, and that connects up with intention's over here now, with your intention and action, and there's some kind of long shot of faith going on here. That there's a connection, but it's a little more tenuous and ungraspable than the idea of belief, right? And then that all kind of kicks around into this idea of feedback, that there's something connecting it all. There's a feeling of either ease or dis-ease, which is providing that feedback for making another step, having another, I guess, for the truth and law to keep expressing itself through this circle right here. Cindy?
Okay, I would switch things like 90 degrees and have like the intention and action lead into the feedback, because if you're going to take an intention or an action, you're going to assess what the feedback was from that before you would go on.
So do you want this to be, I guess the word I would use is reflexive, that it goes both ways, that the feedback is feeding your intention, and the intention is also kind of like viewing the feedback?
Yeah.
So would this satisfy your desire for that image?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. Matthew, saw your hand?
Yeah, I would put it, I would insert ethics between truth and values, because, or value, because in my mind, from the truth is where we get our ethics from, and then from there we kind of ingrain our moment by moment values that then form our intentions and actions.
So you said between truth and value, you would have it ethics in there. Like, is it in a line? Is it like? Could I write ethics right here?
Sure. Yeah, that worked for me. Yeah, it would be part of that circle.
Gotcha. So ethics itself is hanging out here. This is a skill I need to work on, live board writing. How about anyone online? Go ahead and just unmute yourself and jump in. Yeah, Dave?
I would remove faith.
All right. Big guns. Yeah, you want to say anything else about that?
I just don't understand its place.
Feels
That's what I remove.
like an appendix.
I agree with
Just,
him.
all right. Out of the picture. Unnecessary.
And I would put faith back in.
Oh.
Because it's fundamental to my.
Okay. All right, we have a couple other people in the class doing that. We'll wait on that. Let's. That's just too brutal. We gotta wait a couple steps before and then jump in and we'll put faith back
But
on.
are belief and faith the same thing?
Oh,
Oh, no.
no.
Anyone else online?
I'm just asking the question. I'm not saying that.
What about trust instead of faith? Trust. Like taking things, it's kind of like faith.
Sure, I'm asking, what's your assertion?
Well, that there's like an inner knowing, or there's just something that you don't need to. You're not rationalizing it. It's not coming from up here. It's coming from this inner knowing, and so yeah, it's kind of it's kind of like faith.
Well,
How would you draw it?
I would probably put it back where faith was.
Okay, it's coming back.
It's like yeah.
It's to the powers. Now we have trust. many people are feeling the faith. The faith. Would anyone else be adding?
I would swap faith and belief.
Ooh, okay. That's fun that this is such a vibrant part of the chart. Okay, so we have. And Jacob, you want to say a bit more about that? What's your feeling around that?
I feel like I would also replace faith with like intuition. But I feel like there is that like that deep trust that is necessary, and it can often lead you somewhere, and sometimes you just have to trust it and see where you end up, and then from that you may find belief, you may find some semblance of truth or some kernels of it at the very least that kind of fuel the entire process. But I feel like in order to get to that truth or any kind of grain of ethical truth or ethical living, you need to start with some trust and faith, some deeper belief that maybe things can transform if you put the intention out there.
Sure. So something I'm hearing is green is kind of like has a lot to do with the juice, and kind of it's interesting that we have so much energy around like faith, belief. How does that matter to this this whole process? So I'm gonna go green. Green is the juice. Green has to do with it. Maybe we'll also. Yeah. Now I'm writing messy stuff up. Yeah, anyone else? Yeah, Pierre?
I'd say maybe faith and belief are almost opposites.
Oh.
Ooh.
Belief is a belief in a thing, and faith is openness to whatever will come.
Mm-hmm.
Belief is sort of a closed, I believe in this one thing.
What would you do? I know it's.
I have problems with faith just because it can't be proven. And I feel that a lot of this, that there needs faith to be ethical.
I know I've seen pain looks on some people's face through their masks. Yeah, Pierre, you want to get back in there?
Well, I also, when I first saw this, and I still think this, I would think that one would act from a value. And that value would come from the truth or law. And then after action, one would receive feedback.
Yeah.
And so the arrows for me would go completely the opposite direction.
That was my first thought after I drew this. I was like, oh, this is nice. And I was like, the arrows can go everywhere. Like so, where are we? We're gonna put arrows. We're gonna imagine. I started it when I talk about it. I usually start at this place, but let's say this is the start. The truth.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Please?
Is that
Okay, and I don't mean to offend anybody. Okay, so I just want to start. My mom was in a religious cult, and faith is a word that I abhor.
Did I hear that right? Abhor?
Abhor.
Oh.
Because she believed in idiotic and preposterous and I frankly think destructive ideas. So I mean, I'm sure there are many good. I mean, that faith is different for everybody, but for me, it's an odious.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for sharing. I think you're not the only person who is averse to that word. So we're gonna put faith is scary. That probably does it. Probably a word would be better.
Maybe it's a bit bit of semantics too, because, you know, I identify with what Wendy and Pierce said about faith being an open-minded kind of concept, a deep intuitive kind of a knowing, rather than something that's locked into a belief dogma type thing. Although beliefs are, can be utilized too to inform ethics and, you know, belief in goodness, belief in, you know, but, yeah, and I just think maybe it's a matter of, definitions and semantics there.
Sure,
How,
could be.
what we've experienced in our lives that brought us to that particular definition of, without analyzing what Webster might say about that,
Sure.
you know? Yeah.
Holly, were you gonna get in here?
I have the word investigation in there somewhere.
Ooh.
There you go.
And so maybe it's somewhere between faith and belief, because faith is more like a feeling, like you're saying, like intuition, like you're like, you know, you have a feeling for something and then you need to investigate it and see if it fits, like, so it's somewhere in there with like values and like maybe it's between the two.
Or it could be a
Investigation.
feedback loop too.
Right, yeah, and that, yeah.
I like that. Investigation, reflection.
Oh, I never really realized the word invest is in there. That's like, I don't know, my dad's a stock trader. So but investigation. I mean, there's something, right? There's a purchase here. That investigation, it's like invest, but also, you know, there's kind of an unknown along with investigation. Let's see. That's maybe 3 more, and hopefully, I would like it for me to be from all people we haven't heard from. That'll put us close to everyone. That's fun. Sarah?
So, at some point when I was looking at your chart, I thought that the way that you actually experience all of this is like just take every single word and layer them on top of each other.
Whoa.
Like just make a, so you can't actually tell one from the other. That's kind of how I feel like we mostly live it from minute to minute.
Yeah.
That doesn't
Okay.
really help.
How do we illustrate that? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I did, and it's just every word over top of each
It's
other.
just a blob.
You have to do it
Yeah.
not like
Like a stack of pancakes?
yeah.
Just one cookie.
One cookie?
Just put, add chocolate chips in there. One.
I guess we'll call it the short stack
Just
image.
like write them all on top of each other.
Short stack image. Short stack.
They're usually interacting together all the time,
Yeah. They're all just.
not very neatly.
And then we have the syrup on top.
Or like a stack of Swiss cheese with the holes, and sometimes the holes all line up and things fall through, and sometimes things get caught at various layers. Anyway, sorry.
The food analogies can go on and on. Anyone else? We got 2 more shots.
I would add doubt between value and action and intention.
Yeah, doubt. What color would you like to achieve?
Red.
Yeah.
Red it is. Doubt.
And then erase self.
Yeah. Erase what?
Self.
You're so Buddhist. How about one more from online? Can we coax one out?
Sure. The board is pretty filled in, but I think there should be another sub loop where feedback is that includes maybe that whole pancake stack thing, because it seems like in feedback is a very dark as in not really visible place where you could get kind of lost, and then you can move from there. You know?
What color would you like on that? What?
Green would be good.
Oh, right, green it is. And then are you imagining? I'm just gonna circle this. So kind of guess we'll just kind of a vortex situation with feedback that I really like that. Okay. Fun. So, I'm not going to try and wrap this up. I think you all get the idea and the image that this is an incredibly complex process that I think imagination really helps with thinking about all the aspects of our being that go into making the decisions of our life. And it's kind of amazing when you just find yourself wrestling with one small point of your life and how does this get tuned, right?
And you could even add alcohol on there.
I think one thing I wanted to add was in terms of feedback would be something about what we're going to study today a little bit, samadhi or concentration. So how aware are you of your feedback? That really matters for if this line is like, wow, if it doesn't really connect up at all, or is it like, boom, you get the feedback, you feel that, you're never making that mistake again, right? Or you made a great choice, you are going to do that every time, or something like that. I'll put my own in. Concentration. Where's your center? Concentration. Well, no one can read that anyway. Well, great. That's pretty much a closed loop activity for this evening. That was really fun. I could just keep doing that for the next 25 minutes and have certain arguments break out and make sides on the room and have people debate various things. I think that'd be really fun. But alas, we'll move on to other things. So, and in terms, how many people got to the Sila Teisho by Ejo? People get to that? Awesome. Most people seem to have read it. So I think today my hope is that we'll holster comments on that. I have a friend, she studies, she's a disciple of Ejo. She studies religious studies and is in textual translation at Harvard University. And she teaches about sacred texts. And one of her definitions of a sacred text is that it offers unlimited gifts. It offers unlimited, endless gifts as you pay attention to it. And so I really consider my teacher's teishos to be sacred texts. They're there, and as you look to them, we can keep mining them for insights and explanations and real kind of I find it kind of chiropracts my heart sometimes. Just kind of like, I didn't even know I was sore there out of alignment, but I just get a little here and there and something aligns in me. So I'd encourage people, and I think it will be the only homework for this week, is to read that one more time. And it'll be really interesting if you thought like, okay, I'm going to do this once, and I gave it the time it deserved. And then if you can muster that same kind of energy to bring a fresh eye to it, to bring yourself to it in a calm space, and read through it one more time and see what else might appear out of that. And I think that'll be interesting, because today we're going to do a basic rundown in Buddhism, sort of the bread and butter Buddhism class, you might say. Many of you were in the last class with me that we did here, which was Foundations on Buddhism. So this will be a review and a refresher. So please stay with me, and we'll see if we can extend anything that just happened. Yeah. That sounds like, so I'm going to basically begin lecturing soon. Anyone have any thoughts about kind of nuts and bolts about how class is going? People are on the email list. All that stuff kind of good?
Genjo, if we wanted to write to you, the way you text or the way you emailed us these things was from buddhaoffice.org or whatever. Should we address our comments directly to you, Genjo, or to...
I think the office email is good. But if some of you happen to have my personal email, I sort of will use that for...
Does everybody have privilege to read that if it goes to office.org?
Some people would have privilege to it, but mostly no one will.
Okay.
If it says for Genjo or this class.
Somebody might be tempted to
If you have any feelings about security or sharing something you don't want to be seen, just send it to my private email. And then if you want my private email, you can have that. I'll give that to you. So, yeah, that's a good question, Ginger.
Okay.
I told you. All right. People ready for a little bit of lecturing? So my hope is today, last class, I won't go over all the thoughts I offered about sort of tilling up the soil of our ethical imagination. I offered everyone my notes, so feel free to go back and look at that. That class got me really jazzed. I thought that was really fun to prep for and offer. And now my hope for today is that we'll sort of, we're feeling enlivened and thinking sort of openly about how ethics might operate in our life to sort of bring our hearts, our kind of open hearts, to sort of Buddhist teaching about really the path at large, and then sort of from within there locate ethics. And then next class, I'll spend more time talking specifically about how this particular tradition, so we're a Zen Buddhist tradition, a stream of Buddhism that's coming, came out of India, like all Buddhist traditions, and went through China and into Japan, and now it's here in the US. So how is our particular tradition holding ethical investigation and practice? So that'll be next class. And this class is just kind of like, where are the lists? Where are the flowcharts of practice, and how does ethics fit into that? And so we'll go through some of the most foundational teachings in Buddhism, and this is going to be very rough and brief, but hopefully for many of you who are new to Buddhism, this can be enough to sort of get us all on the same page together. And then my plan is for the follow-up for this class, I'll offer a number of resources if you're like, man, that karma thing, I just did not get that. There'll be a short teaching video there, some other resources to look further into if you feel inspired. So to start off, we'll talk about these terms that you've probably, if you've been in any Buddhist circles, you'll hear a lot. Impermanence and no self. Impermanence and no self. Anicca, this is impermanence, and anatta, no self. So these are two terms that are used, they are a more metaphysical approach, just kind of shooting straight for kind of a truth of life, something about reality, is that nothing, no physical thing in the world stays put, or could we find kind of its essence, right? So classic, we could pick any example. Classic one is, a glass of water. What is water, and where does it come from? We could say, it comes from the clouds, goes into a river, the ocean, to my body, it moves through. Humans are what? Are we 80%, 90% water? Which one is it? Is it 90?
97, 98%.
98% water, right?
Like mostly water.
I am water.
Salt
So
and stuff down there.
anything we point to, the tree, the table made of a tree, it touched innumerable hands to get here. So everything that we find corporeally as an existing thing is connected to everything else. You can't really find what it is when you start looking at it or for it. And the same is true internally. So externally, things, internally, myself. This thing that I think I know I am, I act with a good amount of, assuredness about what I am and what I want and what's good and what's bad in life, and I move forward as though I know what I am. But really, my eyes of viewing the world are changing all the time. What I was growing in my mama's tummy, when I was 6, when I was 14, now that I'm 30, going on and on and on. My concerns, my views in life, my relationships, all these things that affect what I am, right? They're moving and changing all the time. I can't say that I'll ever find the Genjo, the mark, that is the core of it all. So Buddhism doesn't believe that there is a kind of unchanging soul essence of each person, but rather ourself in one moment is a confluence of everything in the entire world flowing into us right at this moment. And so that's not to say that there isn't something here right now. There is something here right now. But when you try and find out exactly what that is, you can't find what it is, right? We know we're so deeply tied to our parents, our families, our important early childhood experiences, and your friends and community right now. So I won't go into those too much. We spent a number of classes on those, just really feeling into that in the last class. But I think on one sense it's kind of a metaphysical statement that things are impermanent and there's no permanent self in here that I can find. And yet on another hand, it's pretty accessible. It makes sense when you think about it. And so these terms point at a word that is often heard, that emptiness. These are teachings about emptiness. And that's a pretty bummer sounding word when you hear that at first. Like life is empty. But another way of saying it's ungraspable fullness. Ungraspable life is flowing all the time. What's empty about it is that you can't find an essential thing of it. You can't just get down to the core and say, I've got it. Because once you grab it, you've grabbed the horns of the bull. You've grabbed everything in the entire world. So I used this quote last time in class. I guess not really a quote, it's just something I said to describe this, that an ungraspable living flow of materiality and heart is what I am. An ungraspable living flow of materiality and heart is what I am. And also other beings are in there. And words that are, that description is sort of talking about the words that are used of reality, mind, if people, or Buddha's mind, you're like the Buddha mind or Buddha nature. That's what these teachings are pointing at and saying that that's the foundation of beingness, right? And also truth, law might be what that's pointing at too. There's a quote from the founder of this particular school of Buddhism. His name is Dogen Zenji. I think 15th century was when he was living in Japan. And he has a quote from one of his famous fascicles, the Genjo koan, which is not my name, it's different characters. It's to study the way is to study the self. And to study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be verified by the 10,000 things. So if you want to study the Buddhist way, you study yourself. Joichi took away myself. But exactly. Right. It takes all those pieces in there. And then when you study the self, you find that how could I find me? Perhaps you're sitting meditation and you find that you're just thinking about a couple things that happened to you earlier in the day. Who could you be without all those other things? And we find that we're constantly a conglomeration of the entire world flowing through us. So when we start to study the self, we begin to see that the self, the idea I have of myself doesn't really hold much water. And once we start to forget the self, we realize that in that moment of forgetting that or losing sight of an essential me that I could just know and grasp, I find that the whole world coming through me verifies my life. I am uplifted by the children shrieking in the backyard, whether I feel good about that or not, or the crows bursting in this energy. That's going through me, and that's my very life right now. And it's so easy for us to poo-poo that and say, oh, that's not very much, that's nothing, that's not really who I am. But I think in this Buddhist investigation of spirit and heart and mind and reality, that these things become very precious and important. And your lived experience right now, rather than just a filing cabinet of ideas and values you have about yourself that just stay kind of static in the back of our mind. And so this emptiness, fullness, impermanence, and no self, in one sense it's very, the right word. I'm caught in a total flow of life that is sort of bewildering. It almost seems like there's no possibility of grasping it at all. I don't know if many of you feel this when you might sit down for meditation once in a while. Just be like, what? How could I come to grips with this, in a sense? And there is some teaching about that. And the teaching that helps us sort of find some grooves in this wild mess of being that I am is karma. This term karma. So many times we'll have, in our culture, a very simplistic idea of what karma is, that, someone's a jerk, then they get hit by a bus. I don't even know where that example started, but it's kind of a classic one, that there's some maybe objective tallier, maybe it comes from our Christian roots, there it is, some objective tallier being like, ooh, that was a good deed, here's a chocolate cookie, and then, a bad deed, here comes the bus. So it's not quite like that. The word itself means action, it means cause and effect. And so this is a concept that's present in East Asian and Hindu religious ecosystems, all of them pretty much. All of this is a really ripe and full religious idea that goes back to very early roots of humanity. And they're different within all of these schools, even within the Buddhist schools, even within Zen schools, even with like 5 people who say they believe the same thing in the same room, there will be different ideas of what is going on with karma. But you can see why that's so important, at least maybe not yet. It's really important. It's talking about where's the fulcrum of human agency with this action or cause and effect. And so Buddhism identifies a number of realms of cause and effect. They're called the niyamas. And I think there are 5 in total, and I haven't studied this so much, and I forget what they are, but one of them is physical laws. Newtonian physics is a nice one. There's very stable, knowable cause and effect relationships in physicality. Also in heredity, there's a cause and effect there that we can study and learn about and see holds true throughout time. And I forget what the other 2 are, but the one that's most important for us is volition. So through the mind of human beings, looking at volitional action, there are traceable arcs of cause and effects within human intention and the intention of living beings. And that comes through us through thought, speech, and action. And they're defined as being either light or dark, good and bad, kusala and akusala. So skillful or unskillful is a term you often hear. And so skillful karma or skillful action, generosity, energies dedicated towards kindness, compassion, helping others, the good stuff. And akusala karma or intention, stinginess, meanness, dominance of self-view, violence to get your way, bad karma. And then mixed. There's kind of a title called mixed. Most of all of our karma really is this mixed variety, that there's almost always occurrence of both good and bad, light and dark, and almost everything we're doing all the time. And then lastly, karma that ends karma. It's really interesting language right there. The karma that ends karma. And most of what you hear in much of Buddhist teaching, so there's streams that we hear about often that we're trying to cultivate compassion, loving kindness. We might hear this in ethics quite often. Do the ethical or right thing. Do the good things. Good karma. And then in lots of streams of teaching, you'll hear stuff about wisdom, perfect concentration or meditation, no subject or object within your experience, perfect flow of life and experience. These kinds of words and phrases and expressions are pointing at the karma that ends karma. So you can see, let's say we're talking about a human being in the midst of that roaring river of experience of no self and impermanence. And we're stuck in all these places trying to figure out what to do. We're trying to say, I want to know what I am, and I want to know what this is, so I can figure out how to act. You could say they're kind of crude arrows and bubbles, maybe a lot like this, trying to figure out what to do with a human life. And obviously, there's lots of confusion within that. And maybe and even if you're doing lots of good karma, it might still not be according with the full expressed truth of anicca and anatta, this no self and impermanence. There's something very subtle, mysterious, lively, ungraspable about that. And maybe just for kind of shorthand here, we could say that the karma that ends karma is action, intention, thought that is in perfect accord with no self and impermanence. And this, we won't go into it too much now. There's lots of ways we could frame that in understanding, but often people will talk about intuition, right? You're so free of wanting to gain anything that you're just able, if we were talking about Levinas, he's saying that one of the first aspects of our being in the world is another face is imploring or is asking us for something. We're meeting the needs of other faces. Maybe that without any other thing added on, we're perfectly in tune with that mutuality, right? Maybe right there is the no self. I'm changing as I meet every face that comes before me. And not in a way that's the right word, I'm changing so I can meet them and not being authentic, but actually authentically meeting their face and what is in their heart right then dictates how my heart comes into the world. So there's just a few kind of footnotes about that idea of karma that ends karma. And so that sort of leads us into another really important teaching, that if we're talking about karma, and one idea is through karma is that we want to clarify or cleanse our karma. That perhaps if we're moving about through no self and impermanence with very clumsy eyes and hands and hearts, that as we become more sensitive to where we are stuck in some ways within a very confusing and open world, that we become more sensitive and can move more easily in that. And the very first teaching the Buddha ever offered was the Four Noble Truths. And we could say that these give a kind of very basic, simple roadmap. Here they are, the review. See that? Oh, there we go. So the Four Noble Truths as giving a roadmap to what does it mean to clarify or clear our karma, or put it into move it through skillful channels of being in order not to be suffering from being so out of tune with these deep fundamental realities. So these are laid out in an interesting way. This was a common way to diagnose disease and offer treatments back in India at this time. That it went, how does it go? Symptom, cause, cure, cause. That makes sense? Symptom, starting out with the symptom, in that human life is full of suffering. The technical or the Pali term is dukkha. And Thich Nhat Hanh, he calls that ill-being. I think that's very skillful. And he says that this is a fundamental truth of human existence. And that the cause of that is arising of craving or grasping. It's interesting, in shorthand, it's almost always just called craving, but the kind of technical term is arising, so I put it on here as well. The cause of suffering is craving or grasping. The cure of that, the cure is, what was it? Cure. The cure is cessation or nirvana or well-being, and the cause of that is path. He's breaking up very clearly that if you are a human being bobbing around in this profound unknowing flow of things, that we're going to really naturally be grasping to figure it out. We're going to want the good plan. We're going to want to push away what is uncomfortable and grasp towards what feels good, feels nice, makes us feel safe and secure and good. All completely natural, except for that tends to come with a difficulty when we live by grasping. And that's suffering. That's being out of tune with the flow that we can't grasp, we can't actually figure out and place static somewhere. And so he says that the cause of that is craving, and being out of tune is another way we could think about that. Wanting things to be different from our actual experience. And that cessation is the way to calm and cool this suffering. And the way we bring that about is through path. And so we'll often talk about craving as greed, hate, and delusion, and path explained as being compassion, generosity, and wisdom, kind of the direct antidote to craving. So one way we can think about that is, if you've ever, Thich Nhat Hanh uses, I'm leaning heavily on a little talk by Thich Nhat Hanh, and he talks about an orange tree. He says if you plant an orange tree and it's growing up and it doesn't produce any apples, sorry, that would be weird if it produced apples. If it doesn't produce any oranges, you don't say, oh, the tree's broken. Really, you ask, what does it need? What makes it thrive? What makes it produce really full, delicious oranges? And the answering there would be path within a human life. That human flourishing is really possible, that a life filled with ease and joy and patience and softness is possible. And yet, when we course, when our mind, heart, body courses with greed, hate, and delusion, we'll receive suffering from that. Those are kind of the laws, the workings of karma. I like this quote. In that same video, he says that we're always continuing on just more or less beautifully. That we're always making decisions about our actions, acting either out of path or out of greed, hate, and delusion. There's many of you read the book by Kjolgen Carlson last class, and he has a quote. He talks about the law of karma like gravity, that the truth is like gravity. It's operating everywhere all the time. And we can either walk down the stairs or we can fall down the stairs, right? So this idea that the deep truths of life operating as we can see them through karma, we have decision-making ability in here. And it's not that we can just flip the switch on one or the other, that we saw by this circle here, that there's all sorts of different eddies and loops and power boosters in there that can help us develop a more skillful, easy, beautiful life, but that it's sort of fraught with different loops that you're always discovering all the time, right? So, Joichi, could you hand out the paper that I gave you? And folks online, I'd like to turn to the PDF that I sent you all just a few minutes before class, if you could open that. So another way to talk about this marga or path is a kind of grouping called the threefold trainings. And many people who've been practicing here for some time, you've heard these three words a lot. This sila, if you want to write on here, that's the word for ethics. And I starred next to their discipline because that's not the translation we'll usually use around here, but ethics will be the term. That word sila is actually in the 6 perfections, that's the one called sila, the one that is translated as ethics. And I also wrote here that morality is also a good translation there. The other one's samadhi, and this word is what you'll often hear for as meditative absorption, concentration, mindfulness. So for me on that, this feedback loop here, the concentration, the feedback loop. Oh man, this isn't gonna work. Concentration is about the feedback loop. How do things land? How connected are you? How do you actually take up the information about our heart and the feedback we're getting all the time? And prajna is the translation for wisdom, or you could say insight. And that these three groupings comprise the path. And you can see, so these are two, probably the two most common formations of the path that are used kind of in conceptual language. The Buddha originally taught this eightfold path. That's exactly what Marga here is talking about. The word path or Marga is really referring directly to the eightfold path. That's what he taught. And interesting things here is that the eightfold path, the full title is the Eightfold Path of the Noble Ones, or the Noble Eightfold Path. In Pali, it seems like it could mean both of those, so it's kind of interesting to think about. Are they noble in themselves, or is it the path that noble ones take? We'll leave you that to play with. And then in this translation, the 6 perfections, I think also if people have difficulties with the word faith, oftentimes the word perfect is another one that can be difficult for people. This word is paramita, which can translate to something as crossing over. So I think the image there, oftentimes in Buddhist discussions, that teachings can be like a raft and practice can be like a raft to take us from a life based in suffering to a life of ease and joy of nirvana. So they are the things that help you cross over into nirvana. And these arrows are fun. I don't think you need to spend too much time with those, but I offer them to... my encouragement is not to get too caught in maybe trying to see which might be better, the Eightfold Path, the 6 perfections, but to see that they're totally linked and intertwined with each other. By the time in this particular school, the 6 perfections are more often used, or almost exclusively used, I'd say. As Buddhism was coming out of India, sort of new schools were developing centuries after the Buddha had died. And when Buddhism came into China, the sort of beginnings of the Mahayana school, the great vehicle school, had been developing. And the 6 perfections were what had been used. So those folks who are attending Ejo's lectures on Thursday about the Diamond Sutra that comes from Prajnaparamita teachings, which are foundational to the school of Mahayana Buddhism. So that's the form of path that we'll talk about most. And so I included these talks by Master Sosan, or these short pithy teachings, maybe just the first ones from him, and the rest were just from whoever wrote this little piece here. Master Sosan, he was a Korean Zen master in the 1600s, whom I know nothing about, but I saw this and it kind of tickled me, especially in that wisdom kills the thief. That's rather intense. I don't think we talk much like that anymore in talking about path, but it's kind of fun to think that precepts capture the thief. They help us grab something or see it directly. Meditation keeps it still so it doesn't escape from us. And then wisdom, I would say, transforms the thief into something else. And then to think that sila, samadhi, and prajna, they're all working together and relying on each other. It's said that if you're ever sort of feeling you're directly talking about one of those 3, that the 2 are supporting behind it, like a triangle, that the 2 are necessarily behind it, which is fun to think about with ethics per se, that sometimes, the word just having a good moral backbone or making the right moral choice is the heart of ethics. But in this framing, you would say that samadhi or concentration and wisdom are the things that are behind ethical action, or good ethical action. How is that landing for people right now? Maybe I'll give a quick summary and then we might have time for a question or two. Just the idea that in the beginning that the root and metaphysical kind of backdrop for much Buddhist teaching is no self, impermanence, emptiness. And that there's ungraspable being here alive at my root right now. And this is difficult for sentient beings to move in the world with. And it gives rise, when we unskillfully meet it and don't understand this, to suffering and dukkha and dissatisfaction, dis-ease or disease. In Buddhist terms, that would be the disease of living beings, is misunderstanding those core truths of our being. And yet, within that, there is a kind of regularity that we can understand and tune into, and that my pain and struggles come from a particular flow that I can come to know about. And the way that's talked about is karma. And each particular being having their own karma. And not to say that we all start out blank slate, but that each of us carries our own woundings and joys and skillfulness and unskillfulness that actually almost have nothing to do with me or my choice about it. That we're, maybe shaped sort of in the womb as babies in really profound ways and we get sent out into the world and have to further unwrap and make skillful our karma. And then the Four Noble Truths show us that our actions matter and that the way to transform this karma is by path and by practice. And so looking into the prescription here, seeing that ethics, concentration, and wisdom all bundled together, supporting each other, help make the Buddhist path flow. So I personally am not very happy. I'm feeling really regretful that we didn't have more time to go about this. It's a very pithy description of what can happen in Buddhism, what one flow of like classical, bare bones Buddhist path can look like. But I hope that gives people kind of a gist of how things interweave with each other. And then will give us a place to start talking more concretely about ethical practice and discussion within this particular tradition. And that's what I have to offer tonight, and I've pretty much talked till time. But let's say if there are one or two outstanding questions, I'd be happy to field them right now. Yeah, Pierre?
I was just interested in the word thief in the quote.
Mm-hmm.
Why is he used the word thief?
I don't know. What's kind of your first impression of that? Does it strike you as wrong or right?
No. What's being stolen?
Mm. An image I get is a very simple part of my mind that's very loud, tends to think that knows what's best for me as a whole boat and ship of being. And it's often very, very wrong. And so I think it's trying to convince the whole, assembly of my being that staying up till 1:30 playing chess is definitely the best thing I could be doing with my time right now. And that's sort of like, a simple, like fairly benign example, right? But in a sense, it's arguing for a very slice of my experience that might not, it could actually be making the best choice right there, but maybe not. And so I think the idea that the part of ourself has very strong snapshot opinions of things. It's not bad. I don't think it's to be killed, but I think it's to be invited into more relationship with my whole being.
Can I offer something real quick?
Sure. Go ahead, Jacob.
it makes me think of like an old story, like the monk and the thief. And like one evening, this monk, sitting alone, a thief comes into his home and in search of valuables. And the monk, all he has to give is his clothes. So he gives his clothes to the thief, and the thief, pretty shocked by the experience, departs. And the monk, staring up at the moon, muses to himself, "If only I could have given him the moon."
That's sweet. Thank you, Jacob. Maybe one more parting shot before we go. Okay, I think we'll end there for tonight. And so, again, I'm not feeling very satisfied with my own presentation of that, and so for many of these concepts, which really require quite a bit, I think, more thorough investigation to do them justice, I'll give a couple of extra materials in the email if people want to go investigate them. And then next class, we'll actually dive into the precepts, the sort of ethical code of Buddhist practice as it's practiced here in this tradition. Okay. We'll close with the Pali refuges.